Devins was known online as an e-girl. She was loved by thousands and she was so many men's dream girlfriend. But one of those adoring followers was willing to stop at nothing to make her his own. So today's video is going to be another solved true crime case. Today we're going to be talking about the murder of Bianca Devins. Now, a lot of you actually might remember this one. You might have lived through this as it was happening. I know I did, because this case was very much all over social media. I remember waking up after this murder happened and going on Twitter and getting new updates every other hour. It was a really surreal case to live through, and I've wanted to cover this case for a long time, and finally we're getting around to it. But before we get into the case, I do just want to thank our sponsor for making this video possible, Casetify. Me and Casetify's phone cases have been in a very serious long-term relationship now for a good few years, and I would never cheat on them with any other phone case company. You know why? Because I think these are the best of the best. In my opinion, you cannot get better than these. And I'm not even exaggerating. They have the cutest designs ever. They have something for every different aesthetic, and you can even get your phone cases personalized. I've got loads with my name on. And by the way, they don't just do iPhone cases as well. I've got an iPhone, so I'm always showing you the iPhone cases, but they've got a whole range of Android cases now too. So Android users, come join the party, come on. Whether you're using the S22, the Z Flip, the Pixel, they've got you covered. They've got cases for you, girl. Oh, I just spat. But the one thing that keeps me coming back to Casetify more than anything else is how protective these phone cases are. It's unreal. And they're all drop tested from different heights to ensure that they will protect your phone. So there's the impact cases that are drop tested from 6.6 feet in the air, and then there's the ultra impact cases, these are my favorites, that are drop tested from 9.8 feet. Nearly 10 feet. Who's dropping their phone 10 feet in the air? Probably me, actually. And thank God I've got Casetify cases. They are a clumsy girl's dream. Casetify are also very sustainable with their approach to making these phone cases, which I love. Their impact cases are made with 65% recycled and plant-based materials, and they also have a line of crush cases. And the crush cases are made using old phone cases that are no longer in use anymore. They basically take them and upcycle them and give them a new life, make them usable again. Their cases are non-toxic, non-hazardous, and they also have this really cool antimicrobial setting, which basically means that 99% of the bacteria that lands on your phone case is killed by your phone case. That's mental. Whoever came up with that concept at Casetify needs a raise. So whether you're using an iPhone or an Android, Casetify are very kindly offering you guys 15% off of your order when you go to casetify.com/Eleanor. The link is also down below in the description. Thank you so much to Casetify for that discount and for sponsoring this video. Now, before we get into the case, I do just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. This video is for educational purposes, and everything that I'm about to say is just information that I have found on the internet and I'm compiling into one video. Just a couple of content warnings for this case. We're going to be talking about mental health struggles quite a lot throughout this, including personality disorders, anxiety, depression. There's even talk of a suicide attempt at one point in this case. So if any of that is something that you feel like you can't watch right now, I completely understand. Click out of the video now. Hopefully I'll get to see you again with some other case that's maybe a bit more appropriate for you. All that being said, let's get into today's case. Oh, actually, just another warning. There are some very graphic images in this case, not in this video. Don't worry, I'm not going to be putting them in this video. I never will. But I know that a lot of you like to do like further reading on the cases that I cover. So just be very, very careful when Googling this one, because the pictures are too easily available. It's actually really sad. So just a warning there if you do your own research. So today's case takes place in 2019. So this is a really recent case from a city in New York named Utica. And that was where 17-year-old Bianca Michelle Devins was born on October 2nd, 2001 to a teen mother named Kim, who gave her the absolute world. A few years later, Bianca would get a little sister named Olivia. So now there were two girls in this household. But it wasn't the happiest or safest of environments for these two girls to be growing up in, because they had a rather abusive father. Now, I don't know if he was abusive towards the girls, but he was definitely abusive to their mother, Kim. He was a very controlling man, a very manipulative man. This relationship only lasted a few years, and luckily Kim was able to build up the courage to leave this man, and she took her daughters and started a new life with them. Bianca and her younger sister were still very young at this point, and I don't know if their father was really involved in their life for the rest of it, but that didn't even really matter because they found a new father figure in the form of their grandfather, Frank. Frank was a very bubbly, smiley, happy-go-lucky kind of man, and he just adored those two girls. He would look after them during the day while Kim was at work. He would get them ready for bed on an evening. He would bath them. He would sing them songs. And all four of them grew into a really close, tight-knit, happy little family. They didn't need a father. They didn't need anyone else. They just needed each other. But after a few years, Bianca's mother did end up getting back out there, and she met a new man, and I think she remarried, and they ended up having another baby, another little girl, this time named Maddie. So now Bianca has two younger sisters. And oh my God, was Bianca over the moon about this. She loved this baby. She always wanted to help look after Maddie. She always wanted to help feed her, help change her, help bath her. So yeah, in general, Bianca's home life and her upbringing and her family, it was all very good, and she was very happy. However, on the inside, Bianca was struggling quite a bit with mental health struggles. And she'd struggled from a very, very young age. As young as 9, actually, her mother had to take her to see a therapist because she had separation anxiety from her mother. She couldn't function unless her mother was by her side. As she got older, she started showing symptoms of just general anxiety. She would have panic attacks often. She couldn't go into school most days. And by the age of 13, she'd been diagnosed with anxiety and severe depression as well. She was really, really struggling, and just like many other young people her age that struggle with their mental health, Bianca took refuge on the internet. I know I did when I was a teenager struggling with my mental health. That's how I started my YouTube channel. Because on the internet, you can find people just like you, people that understand you when people in your real life don't quite understand it. And it's very predictable. You know what you're gonna get. Every time you open your laptop, all of your comforts are right there. All of your favorite shows, all your favorite YouTube videos, all your favorite people to talk to online, they're all there inside that laptop. It's a great comfort for a lot of people with mental health struggles. And as Bianca started spending more and more time online, sharing pictures, she would do like little vlog clips. Her main platform was Instagram. She loved Instagram. She would also go on like 4chan and all those kind of like forum websites as well. She really liked that. She used Discord a lot. She would talk to a lot of gamers. I don't know if she was a gamer herself, but she was very much in those kind of circles. But yeah, as she's sharing more online and she's posting more photos and stuff, she starts to gain quite a small yet very dedicated following. She had about 2,000, pushing 3,000 followers. And they loved her. And Bianca found great comfort in this community that she was building on Instagram. A lot of the people that she would come in contact with also suffered with mental health struggles, and she really enjoyed talking to these people and helping these people and having someone to confide in herself as well. They would help each other. Bianca had kind of like an online persona that gave her a lot more confidence than what she had in her real life. A lot of people that knew her in real life said that she acted and spoke a lot differently online than what she was in person. And I think that's, you know, it comes down to probably anxiety and shyness. Maybe she didn't feel like she could fully express in real life, but online she can. I guess you could describe her style as that like e-girl style. Going back to like 2018, 2019, that style was super, super popular. I fell victim to it, and if you were around at the time, you know I did. She had like winged eyeliner, she had the dyed hair, she dyed her hair like cotton candy pink, it was so nice. And she kind of went for that like emo clothing style, and she would edit her pictures in that kind of aesthetic as well. She would edit like PNGs of chains and Hello Kitty and stuff like that. Everything in that like e-girl aesthetic. She was all over it. She loved it. But what she loved the most about this platform was helping people and having people to help her as well. It was a two-way street. She had now thousands of friends to confide in, and they could confide in her. And it was really useful for all of them to have this. And it did help Bianca's mental health in the short term. You know, if she was having a panic attack, she could go online, she could find people to talk her through it. But in the long term, it really didn't do much to help cure her or heal her or help her deal with issues in her life, and her mental health did only get worse and worse as the years went by. By the time she was getting to like her mid to late teens, her behaviour was becoming quite erratic. She ran away from home one time. She had this problem with getting overstimulated. Every time she would get overstimulated, I think she would like lash out at people, or she would have like a meltdown that would cause her to run away, things like that. And these started happening more and more frequently, to the point where she was actually being hospitalised whenever she would have these meltdowns. And by the end of one of these hospital stays, Bianca was assessed by a psychiatrist, and at the age of 16, she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And this felt like quite a weight off her shoulders, to be honest, because she knew that she'd been struggling for a long, long time, but she couldn't really like explain it to people. And now it had a name. Now it had a definition. It had symptoms that she could look at and say, yeah, that's me. That's what I've been suffering with for so long. And most importantly, it had treatment. Now they knew the steps that they could take to help Bianca. So she was put on medication to help stabilize her mood swings, and these meltdowns that she would have became less and less frequent, and things were going really well. She was also gaining a lot of self-esteem that it seemed she'd lost over the years of having anxiety and depression, not going to school. Her self-esteem was really on the floor, and now she was more confident, she was brighter, she was smilier, she was putting herself out there a lot more. It was really nice for her family to see this. I'm not gonna lie, she was never back to like 100% well again. She was still struggling with her mental health. It was a constant battle for Bianca, but there was definite improvement, definite progress, and everyone was so happy to see her happy. She started going into school again, which was amazing. And so finally, she was getting to know her peers, getting to know other people in her class that she'd never really gotten a chance to socialise with. And Bianca in school was known as a very just nice, fair girl. She was happy to be friends with anyone and everyone. Didn't matter who you were. Bianca saw everyone as an equal, and everyone deserved to be her friend. Basically, she wasn't too good to be friends with anyone, even like the kids that you would class as the weird kids. Bianca was nice to anyone and everyone. In fact, there was this one boy that was quite badly bullied by pretty much everyone in that class. He was kind of like the butt of every single joke. Everyone picked on him. He was not seen as an equal in that class. And he said that Bianca Devins was pretty much the only person that was nice to him. The only person that treated him like a human being. It's really sad to hear that boy's story. My heart really goes out to him, but that says a lot about Bianca as well. She wasn't afraid to stand up to bullies. She wasn't afraid to go against the grain if it would make her look weird, if it would make her stand out. She didn't care, because she always wanted to do what was right and what was fair. In school, Bianca Devins was known for her good looks. She was such a beautiful girl, and I kind of hate saying this kind of thing in true crime videos because it feels very shallow to say that someone was known for their physical appearance. But it's true. She was a very objectively beautiful girl, and in fact, she'd been scouted for some modelling work. She'd done a fair few photo shoots, and I think she really enjoyed them. I mean, she did multiple, so to me that says she enjoyed them. In 2019, Bianca graduated from high school, and everyone was just so proud of her. So proud of how far she'd come and that she'd actually managed to finish her schooling. She was due to start community college in the fall of that year. She was going to major in psychology because she actually wanted to go into the mental health services. Because of everything that she'd been through in her own life and all of the suffering that she'd had, she wanted to try and prevent other people from having to go through what she'd gone through, which I think is such a lovely sentiment. You hear about this quite a lot. A lot of people that have gone through mental health struggles in their own life do go on to work in the mental health services because they want to help other people just like them. But anyway, that chapter of her life was due to start in the fall, but right now, she just graduated from high school and it was summer, and she was just living her life. That being said, she did still struggle with her anxiety, so she wasn't going out and doing much. She was definitely doing more than she had done in the past, but still a lot of that summer was spent at home, on her laptop, on her phone, online, on social media. And a lot of this social media following that she'd amassed was very much like her. There were a lot of young girls that were going through mental health struggles. They identified with Bianca, but not all of them were like that. Like I mentioned in the start of this video, a large portion of Bianca Devin's following on Instagram were men that found her attractive and followed her for that reason, to see an attractive girl. And there were varying degrees of this. So there were some men that followed her and just liked her pictures, you know, just following an account to follow the account, whatever. But there were other men that took it a step further, and they were basically following her just to gawk at her and harass her and objectify her in her comments. A lot of them were kind of disrespectful towards her. And a lot of these men were older than Bianca. They were in their early 20s and she was 17, so still technically a child. And the way that a lot of these men found Bianca's Instagram was through other things like 4chan. Like I said, she would be on 4chan a lot, and I don't exactly know what it is, but I know it's quite a weird, creepy, kind of scary place. It's quite unregulated. It's kind of like Reddit, but without mods. So people can like post, to be fair, I don't know if it's got mods now, but like people can just post whatever they want. And they really do. Like there ends up being all sorts of content on there, like gore content and stuff that you don't want to be stumbling across. It's all the like all the edgelords go on 4chan. It's got a large male population on 4chan, and so she was one of the very few girls that got chatting to people on there, and a lot of them that ended up like following her on Instagram were what you can call incels. And these incels would beg for Bianca's attention. She was like their queen, and they would do anything for her. They would do anything and everything to get her attention. Comment anything under her pictures, message her anything, respond to everything she posted within like seconds or minutes, just to get there first, to get her attention. So if you don't know what an incel is, let me try and explain that for you for a second. So incel is actually short for involuntary celibate, which in essence, incel is usually used to describe men. So it's these men that can't get women in real life. No matter how hard they try, no matter how hard they want a girlfriend or they want a sexual partner, they just cannot attract it in real life for whatever reason. And this often leads to resentment towards women in general. These men tend to be very misogynistic, very bitter over the fact that they can't get women. And then they end up being rude towards women because they resent them, which only makes their situation even worse because now obviously women don't want to get with you if you're being a dick. And with these incels, it's never their fault. Well, to them, it's never their fault. They're always the victim. It's always the women's fault. They always try so hard, and these women are just so hard to please. Not true. You're just misogynistic. I actually think it's this kind of community that invented the Chad stereotype. Like a Chad is supposed to be that conventionally attractive, desirable man that all the girls flock to, and they hate the Chads because they can never be the Chads. And these men, these incels, seem to congregate online on websites like 4chan and Discord. They hang about mainly in those kind of the gaming kind of circles, Discord, e-girl kind of circles. They love a good e-girl. They get very attached to women online, and they start to obsess over them and become like huge fans of these women that they don't know. And Bianca had a fair few of these men that were just obsessed with her online. And because Bianca was online for most of her day, these men had a lot of content to go off. She was posting all day, so they were never getting bored of her. They were constantly being fed new content. And because she was a nice girl, and remember, the reason that she really loved having this platform was to connect with people, talk to other people that are going through the same thing as her. So whenever these obsessed men would come to her, being like, oh, I've got this problem, she would talk to them because she cares. But really, all these men care about is trying to flirt with her, trying to get with her. And she wouldn't respond to every single guy. Like the creepy ones, the ones that would objectify her in her comments and in her DMs, she wouldn't go near them. She wasn't stupid. But it was the ones that went about it in a much softer way. You know, the nice guys. She would respond to them and she would talk through their issues, she would talk through her issues, and she ended up befriending a couple of boys, one of which was a man that was 4 years older than her, 21-year-old Brandon Andrew Clark. He originally stumbled across Bianca's Instagram profile in April of 2019 and he thought she was really, really pretty, and so he followed her. Over the coming weeks, the two of them started talking, they got to know each other better. Bianca learned that Brandon was a Lyft driver, you know, the taxi company Lyft, and he too seemed to have a very troubled life and very complicated mental health struggles that they bonded over quite a lot. As the months went by, the two of them grew really close, and it was very clear that Brandon had feelings for Bianca. He was attracted to her romantically, and I think those feelings were reciprocated. Brandon actually also lived in New York. He didn't live too far away from Bianca, a couple of hours drive, and so at one point they ended up meeting up in person. And I think that went well. As far as I can tell, there's no like notes on their first meeting together, so I think it went well. They met up a few more times over the weeks and they ended up having a conversation about their relationship because Bianca was very much in the mindset that she didn't want a boyfriend. She knew she was going away to college in the fall, and so to like get into a relationship, get into a commitment now, it just didn't make sense to her because she was just going to have to drop it when she went to college anyway. So she was very clear with Brandon right from the beginning that she liked what they had, she liked seeing him, but she didn't want a boyfriend. She did not want a relationship. But Brandon did. He made it very clear to Bianca just how much he liked her, and he said that he was happy to keep seeing her in whatever capacity she wanted. And so the two of them decided that they were going to keep seeing each other, but they weren't going to put a label on it. They weren't going to be exclusive. They said that they could still see other people as well, but they had a nice thing that they didn't want to drop, but they also, well, Bianca didn't want to take it any further either. So yeah, that was the deal that they had. And after a while, Bianca ended up telling her mother about Brandon, and she actually confessed that the two of them had a sexual relationship, which her mother was less than happy with. Of course, remember, Bianca is 17 years old at this point and Brandon is 21. Now, I think the legal age of consent in New York was or is 17, so this was legal, but at the same time, that is also technically a child and technically an adult. Her mother just wasn't happy with it, really. But at the same time, she saw how happy her daughter was for the first time in her whole entire life, pretty much. She hadn't been happy since before she was 9 years old. And so her mother, as much as this relationship got under her skin and she didn't like it, she held back from saying anything to Bianca because she wanted her daughter to be happy. That's all she wanted, and she could see how happy she was. She didn't want to affect it, and so she didn't say anything. But she did have one rule. She wanted to meet this boy. She said, the next time you see him, bring him back to the house. I want to meet him. I want to talk to him, ask him questions. I want to get to know this boy if you are getting this serious with him. And so Bianca, when she graduated high school, she had this graduation party, I think at her house, and all of her friends were there, all of her family was there, and she invited Brandon Clark. So he came along and he met absolutely everyone in Bianca's life pretty much. But through the night, whenever he would introduce himself to someone, he would introduce himself as Brandon Clark, Bianca's boyfriend. And he wasn't. And oh, it was so awkward. Bianca kept having to like interrupt and correct him and say, not my boyfriend, multiple times through the night, multiple times. I don't know why he didn't stop after the first time when she made it clear that she didn't want him saying that. He just kept going. I think he must have done it like 3-4 times. And after this graduation party, a lot of Bianca's friends and family remember thinking that Brandon was weird, a bit weird. But at the same time, there were no major red flags from him. It was just like a little weird feeling. The way that he'd been with Bianca all night was great. He seemed like a great guy and he was treating her really nicely, treating her with respect. Even though they all got this odd feeling from him, no one said anything to Bianca. things carried on. In July of that year, Brandon and Bianca both bought tickets to a concert together to see a singer-songwriter named Nicole Dollanganger, who was quite an underground, like, alternative artist. Very, like, sad girl music. Think like Lana Del Rey, Mitski, Melanie Martinez, that kind of aesthetic sad girl music. And Nicole was playing at this outdoor venue in Queens, New York, which was about 4 hours away from Bianca. And Brandon drove a car. He had a car. So he agreed to drive them both there and back to this concert. So this meant it would be one hell of a journey. 4 hours there, 4 hours back. They wouldn't get home until like the early hours of the morning the next day. But to them, it was worth it. Bianca really liked this singer. She really wanted to go and see her. And Brandon really wanted to make Bianca happy. So they did it. So the time came for this concert. Bianca got herself all dressed up, did her makeup, and said goodbye to her family, and then left to go and meet Brandon so that they could set off. But in the early hours of the next morning, July 14th, 2019, police received a very sudden surge of multiple different phone calls alerting them to something that had been posted online. There was a picture circulating on the messaging platform Discord of a young girl almost entirely beheaded with a knife next to her head covered in blood. And these callers that were sending this into the police thought they knew who the girl in the picture was. Her hair was dyed cotton candy pink. She was wearing winged eyeliner. It was Bianca Devins, and she was clearly already dead. She had her throat slit so deeply and there were splashes of her own blood all over her face. So the people that were calling the police about this picture were trying to give them as much information as they possibly could about Bianca Devins. And actually one of these callers was able to tell the police who the original poster of this picture was. It was Brandon Clark. And then in and amongst all of these horrifying phone calls about this picture on Discord, police received another phone call from Brandon Clark himself. And this is exactly what he said in that phone call. "My name is Brandon. The victim is Bianca Michelle Devins. I'm not going to stay on the phone for long because I need to do the suicide part of the murder-suicide." And then he hung up. So he told police that he'd murdered Bianca Devins and he was about to kill himself. He literally said nothing else on that phone call. He didn't give over his location, Bianca's location, what he'd done specifically to Bianca. That's literally all he said. And so police now had to get on it trying to trace this phone call and track him down. This could take a short while. This could take an hour, maybe 2, maybe even 3. And so in the meantime, police needed to know if Bianca was safe. They needed to know if this picture was real, if it was photoshopped, because sometimes on Discord, on like online platforms like this, people do share things just for shock value. You know, screenshots from movies or photoshopped pictures like this, just to scare people, just to get a reaction, just to get attention. And police knew that. They needed to assess the authenticity of this, if this was Bianca Devins or not. So as they were trying to trace this phone call, they also got in contact with the police in Utica, which is where Bianca lived, and they basically told them this whole situation, and they said, go to the Devins household now and do a welfare check on Bianca. Make sure she's there. Make sure she's safe. So by now, it was about 7 a.m. when police got to Bianca's house in Utica. They knocked on the door. Her younger sister, Olivia, originally answered, but then Kim came to the door, and they basically said, look, is Bianca home? Have you heard from her in a while? And so Kim said, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure she's in her bed. And police were like, no, will you go upstairs and actually check? And so Kim ran upstairs, opened the door, and Bianca wasn't there. She wasn't in her bed. She hadn't returned home from that concert. So she ran back down to police and she was like, no, she's not here. Bear in mind, Kim had no idea that Bianca hadn't made it home. She just presumed that her daughter had got home safe. But now she was realising that she hadn't. And at this point in time, police actually hadn't told Bianca's family why they were there. They just said they were there to check on Bianca. They just wanted to make sure she was there. But they didn't say anything about this picture. They didn't say anything about the phone calls they'd been getting or Brandon Clark's phone call because they didn't want to scare her mother. Just in case this was a photoshopped picture or a still from a movie or something like that. They wanted to assess the authenticity of the picture before they scared her family. But as time was going on, it was quickly getting more and more concerning. Now they knew that Bianca hadn't made it home from the concert. The likelihood of that picture being real was increasing by the minute. They had no idea where she was. She hadn't contacted anyone in hours. So the police asked her mother, like, when was the last time you heard from Bianca? And she said that she'd gotten a text in the early hours of the morning, basically from Bianca saying, the concert's over, we're coming home now. And that was the last she ever heard of her. And so at this point, police are now 90% sure that that picture is authentic. Bianca was missing. She hadn't been heard from in hours, and so they decided to file a formal missing persons report. So in this case, there were multiple different teams of officers doing different things all at once because they needed to work on this fast. They needed as many people on this case as they could because they knew Brandon was still out there and they didn't know where Bianca was. There was just a lot to be doing all at once. So while some officers were trying to locate Brandon, a few other officers stayed back at the police station to look through his social media, analyse both his and her social medias. And that was when they found Brandon's Instagram story from the night before. He'd posted just a random picture of the highway with the caption, "Here comes hell. It's redemption," right? Quite cryptic and eerie. But then they found his Snapchat story, which was a lot less cryptic than his Instagram story because on Snapchat, he had posted a picture of a large green tarp, and this tarp was covering something quite large, something around the size and shape of a human body. And the next post on his Snapchat story was a picture of Brandon's hand covered in dried blood with the caption, "I'm sorry, Bianca." And in the background of that photo, so his hand was in the foreground, and in the background, there was a pair of Vans, a black handbag, and a mobile phone, all believed to be Bianca's. And then the third and final slide on his Snapchat story was a picture of Brandon, like a selfie, of him holding up that same knife that was seen in the picture of Bianca that is now circling Discord. And on this selfie, the caption was, "Thanks to everyone who was good to me. I'll miss you all." He was literally live posting this murder that he had just committed. At every point, he was posting evidence of the murder. So meanwhile, back at Bianca's house, police are still talking with her sister and her mother, just trying to get as much information about Bianca and this boy, Brandon, as they possibly could. Because obviously by now they'd looked at his social medias and their past messages, and they could tell that Brandon and Bianca had some sort of relationship, but they just wanted clarification on that. And Kim actually told the police officers that Brandon and Bianca were just friends, nothing more. Because, I mean, that's what Bianca had always said. That's what they were in her mind, just friends, nothing more. Maybe they did sexual stuff every now and again, but that was not her boyfriend. She was free to see other people. That was how she saw this relationship, and that was how she wanted Brandon to see it as well. That's how she tried to communicate this. Whereas Brandon obviously saw this relationship entirely different to her. And Kim told the police that she said that this whole entire time Bianca had tried to communicate this with Brandon, but he'd always been trying to push for more. She told them about the graduation party where he was introducing himself as Bianca's boyfriend, even though Bianca kept telling him, "Stop doing that, you're not my boyfriend." After this conversation with Kim, police were now seeing a very clear motive for Bianca's murder. It was jealousy or rejection, or like, if I can't have her, no one can. Luckily, by now, police had managed to locate where Brandon had made that phone call from, the phone call to police. And actually, it was only about 10 minutes away from Bianca Devin's house. He'd driven down some random dead-end street and just parked the car. And he'd been there for hours. So police raced to that dead-end road, and honestly, when they got there, they expected to find both Bianca and Brandon dead, as per his plans that he shared on that phone call with the 911 operator. He said that he was doing a murder-suicide and that he was about to commit the suicide part of the murder-suicide. But it turns out he never did. When police arrived, he was alive and well and absolutely fine. So police drew their guns and they started to approach Brandon's car with caution. And as soon as he realised that he'd been caught, this was all over, well, it was about to be over in a second, he knew he needed to do something. And so he lifted this knife that he still already had in his hand, and he proceeded to stab himself in the throat with it. He started bleeding heavily out of this wound, and he was stumbling around. He stumbled over to that green tarp that was still laid out on the floor that presumably had Bianca's body under it, and he just threw himself on top of this green tarp, on top of Bianca's body. He then proceeded to take his phone out of his pocket, open up Instagram, snap a selfie of him and his bleeding neck, and then he captioned it, "Ashes to ashes," and posted it. Posted mid-murder-suicide. It was all very dramatic. As you can probably tell, this whole thing was supposed to be like a super impactful way to go out, you know, like a super performative suicide mission. But actually, Brandon hadn't stabbed himself in the right place, or anywhere near hard enough, and therefore he wasn't going to die from this wound. He'd missed all the main arteries and veins in his neck. He'd literally only stabbed himself like kind of skin deep. All it was going to need was stitches and he'd be absolutely fine. And so as soon as he was like laid there on this tarp, thinking he was going to bleed out, paramedics ran over, patched it up, transported him to hospital, and he survived his murder-suicide mission. Now, he would have to live with what he did forever, and he would have to deal with the consequences of his actions, something that he definitely didn't want to do. But now he had no choice. As all of this had been going on, Bianca's family was still at home, they were still talking to the police. At this point, I don't know if they'd been told about the photo, but they certainly hadn't seen it. And then all of a sudden, Olivia, Bianca's younger sister, got a notification on her phone. So she picked it up, looked at it, and just screamed in horror. She'd been sent the picture of her sister's dead body. The life absolutely drained out of her face, this huge gash across her neck, blood everywhere, the knife still next to her head. Olivia saw this, she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, picked up the phone. The two of them just collapsed to the floor, Olivia and Kim, and they were screaming, sobbing, hyperventilating. Kim was just crying out over and over, "It's not her, it's not her, it's not my baby." Honestly, one of the most horrifying and traumatic ways I have ever heard of a family finding out about the murder of a loved one. My heart just absolutely breaks for them. They found out about this in the worst way possible, and the fact that they had to see that with no warning, oh, my heart just, it absolutely breaks for them. So the current situation of this case is that Bianca's family are at home talking to the police. Brandon has been transported to hospital. He's having his neck wound stitched up. Meanwhile, police back at the crime scene on that dead-end road, they finally get to search this whole area. And it was very clear that Brandon had staged a lot of it for the effect, for the shock value, for the, I don't know. He was definitely trying to create a memorable, impactful scene with this whole thing. You can tell by the way that he did the murder-suicide, the way that he called up on the phone, the way that he took a picture of Bianca's body and posted it online. He was trying to make a whole thing about this, wasn't he? A whole show. It was all very performative, and so obviously he'd taken extra care setting up that crime scene for when police arrived. There were a number of things he did. The first thing he did was, on the floor, Brandon had spray painted the words, "May you never forget me." And at first, police saw this and they thought, oh, it's just another young teenage murderer that is doing it for notoriety, for the infamy. He wants to be infamous. But turns out it might have had another meaning. Actually, more than likely had another meaning. "May you never forget me" is actually a quote from a Japanese comic book named Goodnight Pun Pun that both Bianca and Brandon had read. And online, this comic book is basically described as like a very dark version of Romeo and Juliet. It was like a very dark, very violent romance love story. The two of them felt very connected to it, apparently. I think Brandon very much like related to this comic book because he thought that was him and Bianca. He like related to it on a level that she didn't, because he thought that they were like star-crossed lovers, that they were meant to be together in life and in death. There was also a Bluetooth speaker at the crime scene playing one song over and over on repeat. And that one song actually surprised me. It was Test Drive by Joji. But when you actually listen to the lyrics of Test Drive, that whole song is about a man that is really wanting a relationship with this woman, but she don't want a relationship. She just wants something casual. The lyrics literally say, I'm looking for a long ride, but she just want a test drive. And that's how Brandon felt about his relationship with Bianca. He wanted her, but all she wanted was this casual thing that they had. And there's actually a couple of other lyrics that are particularly eerie within this context when Georgie says, I told you not to waste my fucking time and I'll see you in the next life. Also at the crime scene, they found Bianca Devin's mobile phone, and so they took it back to the station and started going through it. And that was when the motive for murder became incredibly clear. That night, Bianca had been talking to her friends on Discord all night, before the concert, during the concert, after the concert, on the ride home, because they'd had pretty much the whole journey home. Her body was found 10 minutes away from her house. So they'd driven almost 4 hours together in the early hours of the morning until like 5 a.m. So police were looking through all these messages, and it turns out that Bianca and Brandon hadn't been at that concert alone, just the two of them, that night. There was actually another guy there, a guy called Alex. And from these messages that Bianca had been sending to different friends, they could tell that Bianca liked Alex. And she didn't like Brandon. Like, she romantically liked Alex. She only liked Brandon as a friend. So the way that this all came about, I think, was that Brandon and Bianca already had their tickets for this concert. And then Bianca starts talking to Alex on Discord. She starts to like him and whatever. He lives in the area. He also likes this singer that they're going to see. And so she tells him to buy a ticket. And so he does, separately from them. He ended up meeting them at the concert, spending the whole concert with them, and then he left afterwards. And it was just Bianca and Brandon again after that. And from these messages that Bianca had been sending her other friends through this whole thing, it seemed she was so happy. It seemed she really liked this Alex guy. She was saying that he was perfect. She was in love with him. She even said to one of her friends, we held hands. My friend is so mad. Presumably the friend is Brandon. After the concert, on the drive home, Bianca also directly messaged Alex on Discord saying, I think he saw me kiss you. Thinks Brandon saw her kiss Alex, which shouldn't have been an issue because they weren't an official couple and they had that agreement that they could see other people. Those were the official rules, that they didn't have a label. But Brandon never seemed to go by those rules, did he? Like, Bianca tried to make her boundaries very clear. You're not my boyfriend. Stop introducing yourself as my boyfriend. But he ignored them and he kept doing it. He was very deluded in his view of their relationship. He pretty much just set his own rules for that. And perhaps seeing Bianca kissing this other guy broke that facade for Brandon. You know, he was deluded thinking, yeah, she says she don't want to be my girlfriend, but like, she is, really. But this is the first time he's ever been confronted with the truth that no, she's not your girlfriend and she is free to do whatever she wants. And maybe this just made him snap. Brandon's phone was also recovered from the crime scene. And again, this phone had an abundance of evidence on it. In the Notes app on his phone, Brandon had made a checklist, essentially like a to-do list for murder. And it had everything on there that police had seen at the crime scene, you know, the spray painting, the song being on repeat on the speaker. But also, one of the things on this list was a change of Instagram bio. And so they went to his Instagram profile and looked at his bio, and he had changed it so that it was his birth date and then his death date, or what he thought was going to be his death date. If the suicide had been successful, that would have been the day that he died. Although it wasn't in the end. And then underneath the birth date and death date, it said, just know that I feel no pain now. He had meticulously planned this whole thing down to a T, and everything was going to plan, it seemed, until the very last minute when the suicide part didn't actually work. But the scariest part of this whole thing was that this checklist in his notes hadn't been edited for 2 days. The last edit was 2 days before this, meaning that this was premeditated. He had had this plan, this checklist in place for at least 2 days, possibly even longer. He could have been editing that list for weeks before then. So he knew before they even went to the concert that he was going to murder Bianca Devins. So, you know, maybe her kissing Alex wasn't the final straw. He already had this in his head, but maybe that was just spurring him on even more. But whether that kiss had happened or not, whether Alex had turned up at that concert or not, I think Bianca Devins would have still been murdered that night. So police carried on looking through his mobile phone, and there was even more evidence. In his Google search history, they found things like how to choke someone out and how do you hit the carotid artery to kill someone. And then in his camera roll, police found a video. And I think you can already guess what this video was. It was a full start to finish video of him committing the murder. So I'm gonna try and like run you through this video. No one has ever seen this video other than the police. I don't think it was even shown in court in the end. So I've got a bit of a description of it, what I could find. So the video starts by showing Bianca asleep in the back of the car. Brandon had folded down the back seats so that she had like more space to sleep, because this was the early hours of the morning. They weren't gonna get home until like 5 a.m. So as they'd driven this whole way, because remember they were about 10 minutes away from Bianca's house, as they'd driven about 4 hours, she'd been asleep in the back the whole time, presumably. When the video starts and it's showing Bianca asleep, the car had already stopped. So police assume that he'd already driven down that dead-end road, he'd already parked the car, he was already at the crime scene. After showing Bianca asleep in the back of the car, Brandon then attached his phone to the middle of the dashboard, so it's got a view of the whole car. It can see him in the front, and then between the seats you can see Bianca in the back. Once the camera is in place, Bianca is still asleep this whole time. Brandon reaches behind him into the footwell, like, of one of the back seats, and he produces a knife. That same knife that was seen in the picture of Bianca. Again, this knife will have already been in the car before they even went to the concert, so that just proves the fact that he was gonna kill Bianca that night, whether the whole Alex thing happened or not. He'd already planned to murder her. So anyway, Brandon's just pulled this knife out and he's like showing it off to the camera for a while, giving him all different angles. And then he sets it down on the seat beside him and he turns to wake Bianca up. As soon as she opened her eyes, Brandon immediately starts getting confrontational with her, saying, "You know I saw you kiss him, right?" And she responded saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry." And Brandon snapped back at her saying, "Well, sorry's not enough." And then the car fell silent because, well, remember what this relationship was? They weren't committed to each other. They didn't have a title or a label or anything. Bianca didn't really know what to say for a while. And then she just calmly reminded him, you know, we're not together. There's no rules here. I'm confused why you're angry and upset over this. I've done nothing wrong. And Brandon didn't respond back to her. I don't think he really knew what to say here because she was right. She had done nothing wrong. He had no real reason to be mad. After a moment of very awkward silence, Bianca then said to him, "Are you ready to take me home yet?" And this, I think, was Brandon's trigger. He realised that he had just messed up this relationship with Bianca. He'd just flown off the handle for no reason, and now she was done with him. She wanted to be away from him. She wanted to be at home. So that was his cue to put his plan into action now. At this point, Brandon raised his hand and hit Bianca over the head with it, causing her to like fall back a bit. And it took herself a good couple of seconds to be able to pull herself back up. And as she did that, Brandon took a quick look back at the camera, as if to make sure it was filming, because he knew what he was about to do. He then reached and grabbed that knife from the passenger seat and in one swift motion, slit Bianca Devins' throat. Sources say that Bianca then started screaming in terror. She tried to fight back. She even tried to get out of the car. Although I don't know how accurate all of that is because this wound that he had just given her on her throat was so deep that, like I said, it almost decapitated her. I don't know how she could even be moving or screaming at that point. But then she just collapsed back and within a matter of seconds, Bianca Devins was dead. Just like that, 17 years old with her whole life ahead of her. But all of that was taken from her in an instant. Brandon then reached and grabbed the camera and stopped the recording of that video, but he proceeded to take pictures of Bianca's body and he posed these pictures as well. He laid the knife down next to her head, made sure that he was getting everything in this shot, took the picture, and then posted it to Discord. When he originally posted this photo, he sent it along with the caption, "Sorry fuckers, you're gonna have to find someone else to orbit," which shows his motive clear as day. it was all jealousy. If you don't know what he means by orbit, basically orbiting is this technique that a lot of incels use. I mean, people just in general use this technique when they are romantically or sexually interested in someone that doesn't quite share that same attraction to them. And basically orbiting is where you follow their social media and you stay up to date on their life and you comment on their pictures, you message them, you respond to them, you stay in their life as much as you can. Basically, the intended purpose of orbiting someone is that hopefully one day they will turn around and realize that you've always been there, that you've always been supportive, that you've always, shown an interest in their life, and maybe they will want to be with you one day. It's a stalkery tactic, isn't it? It's not a very nice tactic that people use, but it's something that a lot of these incels did, especially with girls that they don't know in real life, girls that they only follow on social media that they're interested in. They will just keep commenting and, inserting themselves in every single post that they make, staying in her orbit. And Bianca had a lot of these men that would orbit her. And Brandon was very, very jealous of all these men that would orbit her. He didn't like the competition. And now it seemed that one of these men that had been orbiting Bianca, Alex, had now made his way into their real life. And it was getting in between this deluded relationship that Brandon had with Bianca. Obviously it wasn't a real relationship, but in his head he was viewing that Alex was getting in the way of him and his girlfriend. So yeah, anyway, Brandon took this picture of Bianca, posted it on Discord, and it very quickly started circulating. People were forwarding it into different chats. This was spreading like wildfire, and it was going around a lot of Bianca's friends who were understandably terrified, and they wanted to assess the authenticity of this picture, just like the police did, because kids know that a lot of shock value images and videos do get circulated on the internet, and they're not all real. Like I said, it could have been a screenshot from a horror movie, it could have been photoshopped, it could have been, someone could have been trying to make it look like Bianca was dead for shock value, for a joke, like a sick joke. And so her friends started saving this photo and trying to reverse image search it to see if it popped up anywhere else online. But no, they couldn't find this image anywhere else online. It had never been posted before. This time that it had been posted on Discord was the first time this image had ever seen the internet, which, that means it's likely authentic. So the friends start asking him, like, where did you find this photo? Where did you get this photo from? And Brandon responded, my fucking car. I fuck Bianca, dumbass. And then he followed that up with, anyways, remember to subscribe to PewDiePie, which this was in 2019. I don't know if you remember the whole PewDiePie T-Series sub race that they were having. It was like a meme. It was an internet meme at the time to say sub to PewDiePie, subscribe to PewDiePie. Kind of irrelevant to the story, but I think that's quite important because it shows how detached he was from what he'd just done. He had just slaughtered an innocent girl, posted pictures of her dead body on the internet, and he's just following it up with subscribe to PewDiePie, internet meme. Brandon luckily never posted the video online. I don't know if that was his intention. I don't know if he was gonna post the whole video. Like I said, the police are the only people that have seen that. Bianca's family, I don't think, even saw that video. They didn't want to, and I don't blame them. But the picture, on the other hand, is a completely different story. That spread like wildfire. It was absolutely everywhere. I remember I went on Twitter the next morning after all of this broke, and it was literally on my timeline, on my Twitter timeline. And Twitter is one of those platforms that's usually quite good at getting rid of stuff like that. They don't allow stuff like that. So I don't know how it was all over Twitter. Bear in mind as well that I am on the opposite side of the world to that girl. It was everywhere. It was worldwide. Over in the UK, I had seen it within 24 hours of it being taken and posted online. The picture was mainly kept on 4chan. Like I said, I had seen it on Twitter, but it was mainly circulating on the more darker platforms like 4chan, where even a lot of the users were commending Brandon for committing another 4chan murder. A few of them have happened where murderers have committed a murder and posted pictures of it on 4chan or told the story on 4chan. Users on there love reading about stuff like that. They love seeing stuff like that. And so they were they were excited about this news. And the comments about this whole thing, about Bianca, were just getting worse and worse as the day was going on, or as the days were going on, with incels going online and commenting things like, "I like her better dead. Women look good with their throats slit." And another one said, "Is it good or bad that this e-thought dying has ironically made my week?" In the days after her death, Bianca's Instagram page grew from like 2,000, 3,000 followers to over 100,000. I think the account has since been removed. And these followers were a very mixed bunch. There were a lot of people just trying to pay their respects, a lot of young girls that felt really bad about this whole thing and they wanted to, pay their respects on this girl's Instagram page. But again, there were a lot of incels commenting awful things under her pictures. Bianca's whole family were pretty much forced to delete every kind of social media that they had because they could not escape this photo. Not only was it circulating and normal people were just seeing it on their timelines, but her family were getting it sent directly to them multiple times a day by sick, twisted individuals, these incels that just hated Bianca for no reason. And when they would send her family members the pictures, they would send them like with awful captions and messages alongside, like, "Look at your daughter now," or "Your daughter's a whore, she got what she deserved." And there was actually one point, 2 days after Bianca's murder, where her mother finally left the house because obviously she didn't want to go out, she didn't want to do anything. She just found out that her daughter had been brutally, savagely murdered. So she wasn't doing anything and they needed essentials in the house. They needed food. She had 2 daughters that she needed to look after and provide for. So Kim went to the supermarket with her friend, and while they were there, Kim received a notification on her phone. Luckily, Kim didn't see this notification. Her friend saw it before Kim could, and she snatched the phone off her and deleted this notification. But it was an airdrop request. Someone was trying to send Kim the picture of her daughter directly to her phone over Bluetooth in a grocery store. And if you don't know how airdrop works, you basically have to be within close proximity of someone to be able to send something. So it was someone in that grocery store. It was someone probably an aisle or 2 away that saw Kim and thought, "Oh, I know, I'm going to ruin her day," and send her the picture of her daughter's dead body. Just unimaginable. I cannot believe that anyone would even dare do that to a grieving mother 2 days after her daughter's murder. Of course, police tried to do something about this photo circulating everywhere. Once something is on the internet, you've heard it so many times in internet safety talks, once something's out there, it's out there. And it's virtually impossible to remove it. They would try and remove it from one site and that would be successful, but then it'd just pop up on another website 2 days later. And it was just constant, like a cat and mouse chase between police trying to get it taken down from here, it'd pop up somewhere else, get it taken down, pops up somewhere else. They couldn't control it, they really couldn't. And so instead, Bianca's friends and family knew they needed to change her image in the aftermath of this. That's probably not the best wording to use, but a lot of people, a lot of horrible, sick, twisted individuals were posting that picture of Bianca under all the major hashtags like RIP Bianca and things like that. So they would be popping up right at the top of search, and her family hated that, of course. So instead, they started a campaign called #PinkCloudsForBianca, where basically everyone would post under that hashtag and under the hashtag RIP Bianca with nice things that Bianca liked. Pink clouds. You know, when there's a sunset and it turns all the clouds pink, that was one of her favourite things. She used to snap a picture every time she saw it and post it on social media. So everyone did that in her memory. They would post pictures of everything she loved. Hello Kitty, her stuffed animals, anything and everything that they thought she might like was under that hashtag, to try and change the way that the internet viewed this case and the way that the internet viewed Bianca. They didn't want the memory of Bianca to be that awful picture taken of her dead body. They wanted it to be this, pink clouds. Pink was Bianca's favourite colour. She loved anything pink. And so at her candlelit vigil 2 weeks later, everyone wore pink to it. Her gravestone was even engraved with like pink lettering. So 2 weeks after Bianca's murder, Brandon Clark appeared in court for the first time and pled guilty to the murder. And he said that he did this because he didn't want Bianca's family to have to go through a full court trial and have to watch that video that he took of him murdering her. And I mean, her family don't believe that reasoning at all. I don't think I do either. They think that the only reason he pled guilty was to just try and get a more lenient sentence. Which, isn't that what most murderers do when they plead guilty? It's not out of remorse. It's not out of, it's not out of any kind of feeling for the family. He doesn't feel sorry for the family. He feels sorry for himself and he wants less time in jail. But either way, it didn't even matter because 2 weeks after that, he randomly decided to change his plea to not guilty now. So his reasoning before that he didn't want the family to see the video, that was out the window. Yeah, he just randomly started denying killing Bianca, even though he'd already admitted that he had, even though police had all the evidence in the world, pictures, videos, a literal video of you doing it. Somehow he was trying to deny that he ever did it. And well, the internet has a theory as to why he did this. It turns out that around this point, even just a couple of weeks after her murder, a TV production company had already picked up this case and decided they wanted to do a documentary on it, which disgusts me to my absolute core that this is 3 weeks after she's been murdered and TV production companies are already like, right, how are we making money from this? But anyway, there was talk of a documentary. And people think that Brandon realised that if he pled guilty and he just went to prison straight away, he wouldn't have a very big role in that documentary. I mean, not that him personally was going to have a role, but they weren't going to talk about him that much. If he just pled guilty, it'd be over very quickly. And he didn't want that. He wanted a bit more attention. He wanted a bit more airtime in this documentary. And so people think that's why he changed his plea, so that this would all go to court and he could do, more attention-seeking things in court that would make it into the documentary. And actually, something that came out around this time, so obviously by now this was huge, huge news in the press, and something else that was coming out was Brandon's family past. Because it turns out he was very like father, like son. His father was an absolute monster, just like him. As Brandon was growing up, he had witnessed his father being insanely abusive towards his mother. And I'm talking like holding her hostage, beating her for 10 hours at a time. There was this one particular time where he accused her of cheating on him. And at first she just kind of tried to laugh it off because she hadn't and he had no reason to think that. But apparently he was quite a paranoid man. He would get things in his head and he would get delusional and he would believe them. And so she tried to laugh it off like, come on, I would never cheat on you. But he wasn't having it. And so all of a sudden he grabs her, starts bashing her head against the wall. She at one point, I think she tried to call police from the phone. And so he literally ripped the phone off of the wall. He proceeded to hold her hostage at knife point with a butcher's knife for the next 10 hours. And at one point, police did find out about this quite early on, actually, and they made their way to the house. But they were just in a standoff with him then because they were too afraid to approach the house out of fears that he was going to harm Brandon's mother. Because the father was literally getting her to do all the communication with the police. He didn't talk to the police once, but he was getting her to say different things to them, like that she was being held hostage and that if they get any closer to the house, he was going to kill her. He was making her say all of that to the police. In fact, he made her say multiple times to the police that she was gonna die and that he was gonna kill her and then himself. He was making her say that over and over. Luckily, she did survive this ordeal. He didn't kill her. I mean, at one point, actually, I think towards the end of this, he realized what he was doing and he kind of snapped out of it and he wrapped her up in a blanket and he was crying, apologizing to her, saying he didn't mean to hurt her that much. Obviously, none of that means anything when you've just held a hostage at knife point for 10 hours. But yeah, luckily she survived that. And reports, they don't know whether Brandon was in the house at the time. They don't know if he was there. I presume that if this happened, like a 10-hour hostage kind of situation where he's holding her at knife point, if he didn't witness this one particular incident, he must have witnessed some shit in that house. For sure. And by the way, after this whole story came out, I think someone interviewed the dad. I don't know where the dad was or whatever, but they asked him what he thought of it. And he said that he felt he'd raised his son right. In response to his son committing this murder, he said, He was raised right. Oh, and also, as all of these revelations are coming out about Brandon's life, other people started coming out, like his friends, his peers, other people his age, saying that they think he'd always had an attraction to young girls. He enjoyed a particular style of animation called lolicon, which I'm not too familiar with, but I think it's basically cartoon characters that are drawn to look like children, and they're like posing in sexual ways. It's like drawings of children that are supposed to be sexual, but I think the idea of it all is that it's all quite ambiguous. So the people that enjoy this kind of art can be like, oh, well, it's a cartoon, it doesn't have an age. They don't look, you know, like children posing sexually. They look just like young characters posing sexually. So the ambiguity of the age is kind of how people are allowed to enjoy that kind of art without it being CP. But like I said, I don't know too much about that kind of art style, so if I've described it slightly wrong, I am sorry. But to my understanding, it's weird, creepy, and disgusting. He was into this particular art style all the way through his teenage years, even into adulthood. And oh my God, one of the stories that his friends told the police was actually that when Brandon was 16 years old, he was talking to a 12-year-old girl and like asking her to be his girlfriend, saying loads of sexual things to her. And I think all of these things, it's just so scary how many big obvious red flags can lie in someone's past, like asking a 12-year-old for sexual things and the lolicon and stuff like that. All these red flags were just sitting in Brandon's past, and Bianca had no way of knowing about any of that. You only ever meet a person as the person that they present themselves as, and if they can hide all of that kind of thing, then you're never gonna know. How terrifying is that? Anyway, by the end of his whole court thing, his plea change was actually rejected. The judge was like, no, you've already pled guilty. We're going to take your first answer. His sentencing hearing actually happened in 2021 due to the pandemic. It was pushed off for ages. And in this sentencing hearing, everyone that was there said it was almost like a completely different Brandon Clark, like compared to his earlier court hearings and everything. It was almost as if over the pandemic, while he'd been in that cell, he'd had time to realise what he'd done. And he actually gave like quite a remorseful statement. Remorseful. I'll let you decide if it's genuine remorse. He said, "What I did, I can't undo, as much as I want to. I apologise to all the people that knew and loved her. I apologise to everyone affected by this, to everybody that had to see that horrific picture of her. I know sorry is not enough, and it won't take back what I did. I wish I had more to give." Like I said, probably not genuine remorse, probably him just trying to get a lesser sentence. But anyway, regardless, at the end of that trial, Brandon was sentenced to life in prison. He does, unfortunately, have a minimum of 25 years, and so he will be eligible for parole in 2046. But at the same time, the way that he went about this case makes me think that he probably won't get parole. The way that it was posted all over the internet and everything, I don't think he's getting out. In the aftermath of this case, Bianca's family campaigned for what is now known as Bianca's Law, which holds social media companies accountable for the violent images that might surface on their website. It also makes it a crime to share pictures of a victim of a crime like this with the intent to belittle or humiliate them. Exactly the way that Bianca's picture was circulated back then. And thankfully, this law was accepted in January of this year, actually, 2022. So that's only a law in New York. Better than what they had before, isn't it? Of course. But yeah, that is everything I have for this case. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you again to Casetify for sponsoring this video. Remember, if you go to casetify.com/Eleanor, you'll get 15% off of your purchase. They do iPhone cases and now Android cases, so get yourself over there. A huge thank you to all of my channel members for supporting the channel and helping me decide the cases that I cover. All of my tier 2 members are on screen right now, so thank you so much. If you want to become a channel member, you can click the join button down below. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a thumbs up. That would really help me out. If you want to watch another video of mine, there's one. Click that one. Or if you want to subscribe to my channel, you can click this circle right here because I post true crime content all the time. Okay, bye.